Welcome to another installment of Friday Q&A. I hope you're all fantastic. If you would like me to answer one of your questions on next week's Q&A, simply put it in the comment section below. And to everybody who submitted a question for this week, I'm going to do my best to get to those questions. I just want to start by saying a massive thank you to everybody for their kind messages. In case you didn't see, we had to say goodbye to Tibby, our cat, who has been in my family for over 17 years. It was pretty out of the blue. She was just her normal self up until about 3 p.m. last Thursday, and she suddenly went downhill and we had to have her put to sleep. So that's one of the reasons why there was no Friday Q&A next week. We've just been taking some time to heal and reflect and remember all the great memories that we had with her over 17 years. And I know so many people out there have pets who are part of their family as well. Pets are definitely family, and it hurts a lot, but the joy that they give us really can't be compared to anything else out there. So to everybody out there with beloved pets, give them an extra pat and maybe an extra treat from me this week. But now, let's answer some of your questions. Guitars that I am attached to in a sentimental way that I don't necessarily play that much, but they have some precious memories for me. I would probably say, looking around here, there's quite a few of those guitars. I definitely own more guitars than I play on a weekly basis. But, as we all know, the perfect number of guitars is one less than you already have. I would probably say some of my Hamer guitars. I really got into those sort of in my late teens, and they were very affordable for high-end instruments. They've since kind of come up in value a lot. So there has been the temptation there to move some of those on. And I think the main one is I have like a quilt top Sunburst from the early 90s. I love the way it sounds and it looks fantastic. I just find that I just simply don't play it that much. I pull it out every now and then and remind myself how much I like it. And then the thoughts that I'd been entertaining of maybe moving it on quickly dissipates. So I'm sure most of us out there with multiple guitars have a few guitars that are our kind of bread and butter go-to working guitars or guitars that inspire us, and then some guitars that we're attached to for other reasons. Maybe you just like them as a kind of piece of art, or maybe they've been in your family for a long time, or maybe they belong to a precious friend. So feel free to share those stories in the comments. 5 albums that got me into guitar playing. Great question. There are many more than 5, but I'm going to go right back to about a week before my 14th birthday, where I had the light bulb moment that I wanted to play guitar. I'd been skateboarding with a mate for maybe 18 months, and he was really into pop punk and nu metal. So we listened to a lot of that stuff. I listened to the Tony Hawk soundtrack a lot, of course, which had some great hip hop, some great punk, and some great nu metal on it. But I would probably say number 1, Thin Lizzy, Live and Dangerous. That's when I realized I really, really wanted to play guitar. I also had a bunch of Deep Purple albums, but I would probably say it would be Burn, because I watched the California Jam concert on VHS and heard the song Burn and watched all the histrionics of that particular gig. So that would be another one. One which is kind of corny, but it's definitely one that I listened to a lot, and it was definitely one where I was aware of what you could do with guitar melodies. There's this album by The Shadows, I think called Moonlight Shadows, where they're just doing covers, and a lot of it sounds like MIDI instrumentation, and it's Hank doing the Hank thing and playing beautiful, clean guitar melodies over it. But that I listened to a lot when I was learning guitar, and it was great to just kind of hear songs that I knew as vocal songs played as guitar melodies. I didn't know that you could do that. Another one would probably be something that's a compilation album. There were these European albums. I think my dad bought them from like the bargain bin, 4 volumes. They were called The Finest of Hard Rock, volume 1, 2, 3, and 4. We had all of those. And that's the first time that I heard Sabotage. And that's the first time that I heard Whitesnake. That's the first time that I heard Dokken and so many bands like that. So that was very influential. But I would probably say out of all of that, to be Whitesnake 1987, I got that, and Still of the Night and all the other songs on it just blew me away. I loved John Sykes's guitar playing, and then kind of connected the dots that John had been in Thin Lizzy as well, which was kind of cool because I loved Thin Lizzy. And then probably Couldn't Stand the Weather by Stevie Ray Vaughan. I loved that one. I loved Stevie. Either that or After Hours by Gary Moore. They were all very early formative albums for me. And then, then I could just keep listing albums here. So yeah, there's probably some odd ones in there, some compilations and some cover albums. And then of course the bread and butter of like Thin Lizzy, Deep Purple, definitely some Rainbow in there, definitely some other bands like that from that era. It was very like late 70s, early 80s influence for me. We've been touring, so when is the new album coming? I don't know. I wish I could tell you all. We haven't done a whole lot of work on it at the moment, even though we've been out playing live a lot, which is really, really lovely. I will remind you all, though, that over the last 18 months, we have released a few live recordings. There is an album called Live at Cherry Bar, which was a show we did, I think, in 2019, that over the first part of the pandemic and all the lockdowns, I sat down and mixed. And there's also one called Live at Dog Swamp, which is like a live in the studio style thing. Shout out to friend of the channel, Troy Nababan, for recording that one for us. And I've just put those recordings up. They are very raw, very minimally mixed. And it's just what we sounded like after not having been in a jam room for a few months. So you can go and check those out. And you can also go and check out the new singles, Rust and Follow the Leader. Speaking of Ragdoll, my favorite Ragdoll solo, or the solo that I'm the most proud of playing, I will always reference the solo in the song Self-Censored. That was a particularly special one. I played it on my dad's 335, and I'll tell you another friend of the channel, Troy Nababan story. I was having a crack at that solo and wasn't quite nailing it. And we were sitting here and it was starting to rain outside and it was a bit stormy. And Troy said to me, he said, "Go and run around the block as fast as you can. Come in. I'm going to have the guitar tuned up and cued and ready. Run in and do the solo." And I did it. I ran around like a lunatic, ran around the block. I was getting wet. I was getting puffed out. I sprinted straight in here. I sat down. He handed me the guitar, and then I played the solo that you hear on that song, Self-Censored. So yeah, that one is probably, the most inspired one, put it that way. I really like playing the solo on Shine, even though it's quite a shorter, more melodic solo. I just really like the way it breaks up the song. And I really love playing the solo to the song Rust. I think that is probably, my most metal solo. And there's some tips of the hat to players like Marty Friedman and Chris Oliva from Sabotage and John Sykes. And basically, yeah, that's kind of the solo with the most widdly stuff in it. Also, the solo in The Last Time is just kind of an all-out rock guitar shredding solo. I love playing that one as well. I always get to it, that part of the set, and I go, oh, this solo again. What am I going to do? If I never got into music, what passion project would I be pursuing with my life? That's an interesting question because I have absolutely no idea. Music has been such an integral part of my life. I would probably be working in the mathematical sciences of some sort. I went and did a 4-year university degree in pure mathematics and mathematical statistics and physics. I still love all that kind of stuff and try to keep up with all the happenings in that. Either that or, I don't know, I would be selling like herbal tea to my friends from high school on Facebook. The pros and cons of the Synergy rack mount system versus something like my Axe-Fx, and I mean, I have both, so there's a reason that I have both. I really like the Synergy stuff as a kind of grab and go, almost like greatest hits of some of my favorite amps. I've got it mounted in my rack above my Boogie Mark IV, and I've got 5 modules. I have the 2CP module for like a Mark II C Plus thing. I have the 800 module, the TDLX modules, like a Marshall thing, a Fender thing, and then 2 Bogner modules. The Uberschall is an amazing sounding high gain module. I don't know if it sounds like a real Uberschall, but it sounds great in its own right. And then I have the Ecstasy because I like that kind of thick, creamy, chewy lead thing it can do. The reason I like that is because I do a lot of demo videos for pedals, and a lot of the time the manufacturers will request that I use it with a particular style of amp. So having a Fender style preamp with 2 Fender flavors in it, having a Marshall style preamp, having a high gain preamp there in my rack with the power amp is really, really awesome. Basically as a sort of like reference set of tones. And then I really like the Syn 5050 power amp with all my preamps, the ADAs and the Boogies and all the other rare stuff that I have. It's great having a single rack space stereo power amp for when I want that. But then the Axe-Fx, the amp modeling sounds phenomenal. I feel like I kind of found my sound in that system. And then I've got all the other effects in there. So a lot of the time I will use the Synergy and the Axe-Fx for the effects if I'm doing something like that, or I can run the Synergy into the Fractal X load and then use the Axe effects to load IRs and effects. So it's just a system that gives me a lot of flexibility. It gives me a lot of options. And, you know, the Synergy stuff, it's rack mounted. I love rack mounted stuff from the point of just a guitar enthusiast. I love being able to just grab the knobs and twist them and set it up with my various rack gear. And also, it's just cool to be able to switch modules and essentially change up an entire rig. I think if Fractal audio never existed, I would probably just be gigging with something like the Synergy setup, and like I'd have an H9 in there or an HX Stomp. This one comes from longtime subscriber and friend of the channel, Roy. I don't really talk about bands like Metallica and Guns N' Roses on the channel very much. Is that for a particular reason at all? Well, I will admit I was never the biggest Guns N' Roses fan growing up. I was definitely one of those people who, I won't say I didn't like Slash, because anytime I'd hear Guns N' Roses, you know, I knew Slash could play guitar, but it was sort of like all the people around me who played guitar and got into lead guitar got into Slash. So, you know, being an edgy 15, 16-year-old, it was like, cool, I want to be different to everybody else. I'll just not listen to that band at all. And I probably wrote them off for a long time because of that. And, you know, there's a reason they are one of the greatest rock and roll bands of all time. Similar thing with Metallica. I was a Megadeth fan. I remember hearing Metallica and going, this is cool, but listening to Rust in Peace and going, this is my jam if I'm going to listen to thrash metal. So I listened to Rust in Peace and Countdown to Extinction and Peace Cells way more than I ever listened to Metallica. I think the other thing is doing YouTube videos. You know, it is the stock thing to be like, well, metal is just Metallica and hard rock is just Guns N' Roses. And there is this phenomena with the passing of time where these super diverse genres at the time get flattened into having like one or two bands as, say, like the avatar for those bands. So yeah, I got into those bands a little bit later. I definitely appreciate them, but I want to spread the word about the bands that I'm passionate about. Like, you know, if I'm going to talk about metal, I want to talk about Megadeth and Sabotage and Queensryche and bands like that. And if it's rock and roll, well, I want to talk about Lynch Mob and Rat and Winger, because they were great bands as well. They were never at the insane popular level of like a Guns N' Roses, but there is some amazing songs in there and some amazing guitar playing to be had. That one flows into the next question, maybe under the radar albums that were really influential on me. Quite a lot of those, you know, I don't know if you consider Sabotage under the radar, but Edge of Thorns and Streets and Hall of the Mountain King were massive for me. There was a band called Millennium, so Ralph Santola, who played with Death, and Jorn Lande. In fact, anything with Jorn Lande on it was massively influential for me, because he's like David Coverdale and Dio in the same person. How can you not love that? And, you know, he's got an album, several albums called The Battle, you know, parts 1, 2, and whatever, with Russell Allen, who I'm a huge fan of. Symphony X, obviously, were a big influence growing up. Quite a few of those kind of things. I like a lot of Southern rock, so bands like Molly Hatchet, who in Australia were not very popular at all. And I think the ultimate one, of course, is King's X. I'm massively, massively influenced in so many ways by King's X and Ty Tabor, and how Ty was able to carve out their own sound and their own style. And yeah, I think my default, if I'm feeling like I'm not playing very well or anything like that, is I will just go and listen to either Dogman or Gretchen Goes to Nebraska, and I'll get my mojo back. And lastly, have I watched the Guthrie Govan FM9 rig rundown? Of course I have. The sounds Guthrie's pulling out of there is so amazing. And I love that they mentioned that the sort of bagpipe sound in the new June movie is actually Guthrie's guitar. I think that is one of the coolest things ever. There's that like step sequence EDM style thing as well that they do in there that I really want to figure out and reverse engineer. If I get something close, I will do a 5-minute tones video about that. But yeah, Guthrie just seems like someone who would be so interesting to hang out with. And they really are just on this other level when it comes to making music. I like in that video, you know, he's just kind of noodling around, plays the Star Trek theme song, and then there's so many other references to other styles. And, you know, there's this classic saying, right there, you can't say that there's any one best guitar player, But there is Guthrie Govan. Thanks so much for tuning into this week's Q&A. As always, if you would like me to answer one of your questions next week, simply leave a comment in the comment section. And if you want to support what I do here on YouTube, there are links to the music that I make with my band Ragdoll and my Patreon. You can also check the link to join the Discord server and join the next Discord server jam. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. Take it easy, and I'll see you next time.